Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. This week we are going to look back at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan, kind of review the picks that I chose, and then see where we're at as a format. I think this is going to be a very self-regulating format, which is actually pretty healthy, so I have to swallow a lot of pride here about Modern, as typically, it's just not a format I like to play. There's a lot of non-interactive or unfun decks to play or play against, but that's neither here nor there how I feel about it. This is a Market Monday, and usually when the majority of people enjoy the format, there will be a lot of price changes in the format. So there was some booms and busts as far as decks. Go check out this article by Saffron Olive over at MTG Goldfish. It will go over the conversion rate of each of the decks, as well as how many it placed in the top 8, plus how many players had either 18, 21, or 24 points. So that's usually, a deck is good when it goes 6 and 4. This is a high caliber tournament. So any of them that hit the 6 and 4 or above the breakout point is going to be a good indicator of a good deck against the field. So again, this article we'll use as a reference point as we go through and talk about it. So I think that the view numbers were shattered. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, for the finals, which is also more significant since it was held in Spain. So especially people on the West Coast, that was a bit hard to watch the Pro Tour as that was going on in the middle of the night. But with that said, the reruns were very significant as well. And I think that overall, the whole Pro Tour was a success. So I wouldn't be surprised that now we will see Modern as at least a yearly Pro Tour thing, if not more, especially if we keep getting some stale standards like we've seen in the past. So anyway, there wasn't a lot of significant price changes in the format. Of course, there were some breakouts with like the Bedlam Reveler, as Gerry Thompson did pilot that to a second place finish. But anyway, let's just go over my picks and then we'll go back to this article and then see where we're at going forward. So the Vythian Renegade, I think, was a pretty good hit. You can see there is a decent amount of price increase here with the 30 cents to 35 cents. Percentage-wise, that is quite significant. This did see play as a lot of 1-ofs and 2-ofs in the sideboard, and we did get to see the little interaction with this coming in versus Affinity. Also with Lantern Control winning, this is also going to be a key card to take care of the Ensnaring Bridge. So I think the Vythian Renegade's stock just went up, and this has solidified itself as a sideboard option in the Humans deck. Speaking of the Humans deck, it was one of the more successful decks at the Pro Tour, having the most played deck on day 1, and I believe it was the most played deck on day 2 as well. So it is basically a deck that tries to get the value out of the humans. So everything in here is a human. There are many different ways to build the deck. Another one that I want to show that might have an opportunity for a good purchase right here is going to be the Kitesail Freebooter in the foil version, as it is only the foil multiplier on a card like this is only about 5 times, which is quite low for a card like an uncommon. Rares, sometimes the foil multiplier will be a lot lower, but for uncommons, the uncommon foil versions of cards are almost as rare as the rare foil versions of cards. So keep that in mind. Kitesail Freebooter has a pretty low foil multiplier, so it might be something that if you do collect foils or you do invest in foils, it might be something to get in on. I particularly do not, because they're too much of a liability. I don't know what's up with my climate, but they tend to curl and tend to warp. And the one other thing that I find with people that buy foils is they're super stingy on the quality. And just my history with foils is that it's just been more of a headache than I want to deal with investing in foils. There's just a lot of times that you lose money on, the discrepancy with that. It's just the people that want foils tend to be the biggest pain in the butt. And I choose not to deal with people like that in a business sense, because it's, again, more headache than it's worth it to me. So anyway, Kitesail Freebooter, those that can manage their foils better than I do, is a pretty good pickup. So anyway, Vythian Renegades, you can see the foil multiplier is way high. And usually this is what we see when a card is about to spike in the normal version. So we saw this card go from basically nothing up to an $18 foil and kind of held there for quite some time. So I think that the regular versions of this card are going to go up to around at least that dollar mark. I think is safe for this uncommon card. This is Alara Reborn. There's not a lot of these type of cards. If you just click on this set here, you can probably see other uncommons that have hit. $1.48 Pride Mage has been printed a bunch of times. A Mind Funeral got up to $4. This is just a casual card. You rarely ever sees any play. And of course, Bloodbraid Elf is still sticking at a $5 mark. So you can see the Alara Reborn does have cards that are uncommons do have a huge opportunity to go up. You even see, a bunch of these other cards here that see little to no play have hit the dollar mark. So I think it's a good one still to get in on. Okay, so the Oblivion Stone. Oblivion Stone was played quite significantly in the Tron matchup. So we can click on Tron here, and you can see all of these decks that played Tron at the Pro Tour. A lot of 6 and 4s. There was an even 8 and 2, and a lot of them. There's mono green, there's black green, there's white green versions. It seems like the mono green version was the go-to choice, and again, most of these did have the 3 Oblivion Stones in the deck. And yep, we'll just click through some of these. There's one with 4. A little bit of a concern, though. Ancient Stirrings does look like it's on the watch list for a banning. We saw Ancient Stirrings just do some ridiculous things in their Lantern Control. Top deck Ancient Stirrings, which found like a needle, and then top deck another Ancient Stirrings, which found Ensnaring Bridge. And all of a sudden, it went to look like the opponent had absolutely lost the Lantern player had absolutely lost the game to locked out the opponent and won the game, which is just crazy how Lantern Control is able to do that. So I think Ancient Stirrings is a bit too much like Ponder and Preordain for green, and I think that we have other options for green for this type of effect. And I don't know if going forward, if Wizards is going to want a card like Ancient Stirrings in the format, how they can justify that without Preordain or Ponder. So be careful with Ancient Stirrings. I think Ancient Stirrings will go back up in value. It just won the Pro Tour. It was one of the most significant cards to find the pieces for Lantern Control, and is a heavy played card in Tron, and does see some significant amount of play every now and again in Pauper. So keep that in mind with Ancient Stirrings. Could go up. It just seems like a very risky investment. But anyway, Oblivion Stone still looks like it was a pretty good hit. Unfortunately, though, like no movement. And I think this is just something that is indicative of just Modern in general. I think that we're kind of saturated with the Modern players already have their cards. So with a lot of the cards that did go up over this weekend, if we go to the movers and shakers of the Modern format, it's new decks. So Black Cleave Cliffs, people buying into the Hollow One deck. Hollow One did have a little bit of a tick up. We saw the Bedlam Reveler go up as well because that's a new deck. We have Phantasmal Image for the humans that went up because that's a relatively new deck. We have Goblin Lore that goes in as well as the Burning Inquiry that go in the Hollow One deck, which is a new deck. Unfortunately, a lot of these older decks, a lot of the cards that exist in these older decks did not really change, even though they had a very, very significant showing at the Pro Tour. So Oblivion Stone, I think, will be a good pickup for the long term. I think that Iconic Masters is pretty much hit its critical mass of how much is going to enter the supply, and then we're just going to get trickle amounts entering the supply every now and again when the Walmarts put it on sale and people buy the packs from there. So anyway, I think that's still a great pickup. So we have now on to Nahiri. Nahiri was something that didn't see a lot of play, very little play at all. At even the Pro Tour, even these Jeskai controls opted not to go into the Nahiri. There wasn't a namesake deck around Nahiri at the Pro Tour, I don't believe. Let's just check out some of these to see if they were at the Pro Tour or not. I don't think they were. We have, nope, Modern Challenge. That one didn't use it anyway. And this one also was not at the Pro Tour. Some of the go-to deck with Nahiri, kind of this white-red Planeswalker deck that tries to ult Nahiri to go get Emrakul. So Nahiri was a bust. I do like Nahiri long-term. I think that these type of decks eventually will strip the supply of it. But as far as the Pro Tour is concerned, it was pretty much a bust. And of course, for that reason, we actually saw a little bit of a dip as people were selling off the copies of Nahiri to choose to invest in something more lucrative. It's still saying pretty flat here on the online aspect of it. So on to Matter Reshaper. Now Matter Reshaper, this is an interesting one. It even dipped down even more after the Pro Tour, but this was a card that I believe almost made this list here, because Eldrazi Tron also was a deck that saw a lot of play at the Pro Tour here. So we had Affinity, we had Burn, we had Humans, we had Tron, and I believe maybe Eldrazi Tron was, yeah, there's Eldrazi Tron. So it was like 6th. Had a player go 9-1 here with the deck, which I think is one of the best records in Constructed. I think there was a person that went undefeated, but was like 604 with the deck. So 9-1 was very significant. It was, yeah, look at that. The best Humans did was 7-2. The best Affinity did was 8-2. The best Burn did was 8-2. Tron was 8-2. Grixis had an 8-2 as well. So 9-1 by this Jacob Nagro, which, yeah, it definitely outclassed the rest of these 7-3 Storm. 9-1 with white-blue control. And yes, and again, yeah, that's very significant for the Eldrazi Tron. So at least one deck almost running this person might have done pretty terrible, must have done pretty terrible in draft not to make day 2. So, because I think Gerry Thompson made with a very similar record with, maybe it was 9-0-1. Maybe he didn't even drop a game with it, but went 3-3 in draft. So this person must have gone worse than 3-3 not to make the top 8 with Eldrazi Tron. But as you can see, there was a full package of Matter Reshapers in that list. So if we go back over to Matter Reshaper and, just click on this Eldrazi Tron, we can see there was a lot of decks. There was a bunch of 6-4s, 6-2. That definitely is a drop with a bad draft showing. 7-3, 8-2, 9-1. So I think it did very significant here at the Pro Tour. Let's see what Seth had to say about the Eldrazi Tron. So was one of the best of the 10 most played decks at converting players from day 1 to day 2, but following up the day 1 performance by posting average to below average on day 2. So it was good day 1, pretty meh day 2 against the field. I still think it's a pretty good hit. I think that Oath of the Gatewatch is a set that's very hard for me to even find at distributors. It was purchased quite a bit for a second set because of the expeditions that were in the set, so keep that in mind. But if you compare it to like Reality Smasher, there's a huge price discrepancy between Matter Shaper and Reality Smasher, and Matter Shaper and Thought-Knot Seer. So this is the one I like the most just because it's still 4 of in this key deck. Yes, there are a few decks that run Reality Smasher that don't run Matter Shaper, and same thing with Thought-Knot Seer, but the same is true with Matter Shaper for Reality Smasher. I think that it is the 3rd most played out of these, but very, very close to Reality Smasher and not too far behind for Thought-Knot Seer. So I think this was a win for the Matter Reshaper this Pro Tour. All right, so we'll go on to Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker did see a lot of play as one-ofs. Overall, Titan Shift didn't see a lot, and Traverse Shadow I don't think played that many of them. And you can see, like, let's see if these Titan Shifts even at the Pro Tour played any sort of Tireless Tracker. It seems like 1 in the sideboard here. We have 1 in the sideboard there, and we have, again, looks like none in the sideboard. So the decks that did go to the Pro Tour decided not to play it. I don't think the Humans were that significant at playing it. Some of these decks that Traverse Shadow that use it every now and again didn't end up playing the Tireless Tracker at all, even in the sideboard. What are some other decks that Humans every now and again? Counters Company does play it every now and again as well, but just as a one-of. So I think this is a pretty bad miss for the Tireless Tracker, because I think the black-green decks were one of the worst conversion rates. Correct me if I'm wrong for this black-green mid-range. Let's check it out to see how many people. Yeah, the Pro Tour 1, 6, and 4. That is not a good showing with this. And then there was only 2 Tireless Trackers in the entire deck. So I think the Tireless Tracker was a miss for the Pro Tour. The Geist of St. Traft still has a pretty good buy-in. You can see that this card has significantly gone up since the market stabilized at $5.50. I think that the Jeskai did very good. I think this was something that, let's see what Seth has to say about the Jeskai list. I think that Jeskai Control, this version has the Geist and Spellcaller Snapcaster package, and story is A Tale of 2 Days. It was the archetype looking like the winner after day 1. 10% above expectation of conversion rate, and then day 2 had a horrible second day. So it just didn't match up very well against all the decks that did make it to the day 2. Again, this would be a pretty good deck to run in the GP, as those tend to be better. Like, there are two different types of decks, like decks that beat really, really good decks, or decks that just beat everything in general. I think Jeskai Control just has a very good matchup overall. It's still my favorite deck out of all the decks in the modern format, as I think has the most favorable matchups out of every deck, as it's just got game versus everything. And this one had the Geist of Saint Traft as a 4 of in this list. So I think this was a pretty much a win. Let's just check the numbers of how many Jeskai Controls we saw at the Pro Tour. You can see a 7-3, 7-3, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. So not a bad showing here with the Jeskai Control lists at the Modern Pro Tour. Goblin Rabblemaster, however, I think that a lot of people preferred in the Mardu Pyromancer. So there's a couple ways to build Mardu Pyromancer. There's going into the Goblin Rabblemaster and not really caring about Bedlam Reveler. So you just run Young Pyromancer in the Goblin Rabblemaster and then still try to do the same thing. I think a lot of people are deciding that Bedlam Reveler is the better way to go. We saw a lot of decks do very well at the Pro Tour with the 9-0-1 with Gerry, 7-3, 7-2, 6-4, 6-4. Very, very good showings with the Bedlam Reveler decks, and I don't know if any of them did run the Goblin Rabblemaster in the deck. I think they're all in the Bedlam Reveler. So there's 2 of in this deck. So it did see some showing at the Pro Tour, but overall it looks like it's been outclassed. We do see this in just green-black decks that run heavier Lilianas. In the decks, like a lot of the Goblin Rabblmasters will put like a package of I've seen pack rats before in these particular decks too. So it might just be the flavor of the week with the Goblin Rabblemaster. It's pretty significant, or pretty decent too, if a Goblin deck ever comes back. It does see play every now and again, these prison decks too. This is the one that does have uses the most Rabblmasters, is this Mono Red Prison. However, it didn't see any play at the Pro Tour. So I think the Goblin Rabblemaster was a huge miss at the Pro Tour. Now, Edge Champion, when it did see come down against certain decks, I think it did very, very well. Affinity was a decent deck at the Pro Tour. You can see a lot of significant 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, 7-3, 8-2. Most of the decks did opt for at least 2 to 3 Edge Champions in the deck list. This one only had 1, but usually when they only have 1, they have them in the sideboard. And again, they're just the Silver Bullet versus some decks 2 and 2. So most of these Affinity decks do require 4 overall, 2 and 2. Yep. And we have 3, and then this one just has the 3. And it does seem like Edge Champion has solidified its place back again in Affinity. So I think this is a pretty good win for the Edge Champion. It still looks like it's a pretty decent buy-in at $3.38. It only ever got down to $3. We've seen a lot of these other cards from Modern Masters 2015 really go up in value. And same thing with the Scars of Mirrodin. It hasn't been this low for quite some time. I mean, it flatlined out here, and you can see this trajectory starting to go back up. So I think that Edge Champion was a win at the Pro Tour. Now, speaking of the big wins, my number 2 had a significant price increase. We just checked out the decks it was in. It got second place, and it was even in a thing on the Ice deck as well, as a one of. So the Bedlam Reveler went up from 80 cents all the way up to $10 at one point, and went down to $6.50. This is something that I'm kicking myself over because I've been investing in Pauper, so I didn't have a lot of free capital to invest in Bedlam Reveler. I think I only picked up a couple play sets of Bedlam Reveler for cheap. But anyhow, I hope that some people did make some significant money off of the Bedlam Reveler when they spec'd into it. The online is a different story. It did spike up and then went right back down. As it's still a weird market right now online for modern cards. So I do expect this to continue this little trajectory up, as it's not in any sort of treasure chest at the moment. But this did have a price correction of around this $2 mark, because the Pro Tour I don't think should affect. Actually, the second place should affect the modern marketplace on MTG quite significantly, but for some other reason, it did correct itself quite quickly. So I do think this is a staple in Modern going forward. I think the days of getting the cheap Bedlam Revelers are over. as this card is just going to continue to go up. I do believe this will go back down because I think that even $6.50 is a little too high for the deck. I think that this is more of a $4 card, $4 or $5 card, because you can compare it to Spell Queller. Now, yes, Spell Queller got wrecked. And I think I'm going to actually buy some more of these at $3.60 because I think this is too low for the card. That's why I was buying in here, and I bought in again here. And I think I'll buy in again here because this deck sees a ton of play in Modern. And I don't think this was a huge miss for the Pro Tour, as you can check out a lot of these decks here, and they are running the Spell Quellers. So I think that I added up how many Spell Quellers were from Eldritch Moon. It was the second most played card. The only card that outclassed it was Collective Brutality, which spiked up like crazy on MTGO, as Collective Brutality was run in a lot of the Grixis shadow decks and a lot of the Traverse shadow decks, or a lot of the Tarmogoyf decks, and many other cards that just had black in it. Of course, you're going to run the Collective Brutality because it's a very, very significant card against cards like Burn, against other decks. The negative killing a creature and ripping out an instant is very significant in this format, and it's definitely good in even decks that want to discard cards, for example. So if we look at, like, if you add up all the Mardu Pyromancer decks, or the decks that can run Bedlam Reveler, the story starts to change if you go down to a bunch of these decks and then start to see the decks that do have, say, I believe this white-blue control was one of them that did. No, this white-blue control is not one of them. This is the one that just runs the non Spell Queller. But we go down here in this white-blue control. No. Okay, so two white-blue controls did not run it. I thought there was one that did have a Spell Queller deck up here, but I guess we're missing it here. Bant Nightfall did not use the Spell Queller. There was one of the Bant Nightfalls that did use the Spell Queller. I guess we'll get to that in a second. But for 7 wins, we have these two Jeskai controls, both running a playset of the Spell Quellers. And then we go down to there was another Spirits deck, the random Spirits deck, that was running this Bant Nightfall. I believe is running the Spell Quellers. Yep, 4 Spell Quellers in this Bant Nightfall. I believe all of these counter companies run Spell Queller. No, they do not. These are Abzan ones. Counters company. Yeah. That'd be Bant company that runs the Spell Queller. Eldrazi Spirits was a 6 win that runs the Spell Queller. Then we have all of these Jeskai controls at the 6 wins had these Spell Quellers, except for that one, had 4 of Spell Quellers in the deck. So there's 4 more showing of Spell Quellers. Then we had the couple of these white-blue controls, I believe, did. Nope, neither one of these had Spell Quellers in the list either. But I think I added them up, and there was twice as many Spell Quellers used in the 6 or above wins than there was the Bedlam Revelers. So it continues to be one of the most significant cards. It does hit the top 50 list, Spell Queller does, whereas Bedlam Reveler does not. No, it does not hit the top 50 in cards, but it does in creatures. If we go over here in creatures, I believe it was 22nd. Yeah, 22nd is in 6% of the decks at 4 copies. So I'm still pretty bullish on the Spell Queller. I think it's got a lot of room to go up. Eldritch Moon is one of those sets that was pretty much forgotten about, didn't have any expeditions in it, was sandwiched in between Eternal Masters, and people, I mean, it was printed on printed demand. The demand was quite insignificant for the set. That's why we saw Collective Brutality and Liliana go up very, very high in price compared to other cards in Standard at the time. So anyway, other winners, of course, the Humans deck. There might be some. Let's just check out Humans really quick to see if there's any sort of cards that still are undervalued at the moment. So Champion of Perish was used in the dual deck. I think you can still find copies from the Blessed vs. Curse for $4.50. Wow. If you can find any of these dual deck Blessed versus Curse. This is a very good set to buy into. You can see that it's worth about $31, and most of these are in high impact. Like, you never know when Gravecrawlers can hit Modern again. It's definitely has before, but I mean, this is just the trinity here of Geist of St. Traff, Champion of Perish, and Gravecrawler that have some pretty decent little value compared to other dual decks. Now, yes, it doesn't have the commons and uncommons that typically are where you get some value out of these dual decks, but I think that, you know, just these three alone makes it worthwhile. It's got a Dread returning into it for whatever that's worth. A card that sees a lot of play in Commander as well as in Legacy. But as well, Kaiso Freebooter foil still looks good to me. Has a very low foil multiplier. I think the rest of these cards, though, have pretty much spiked up in value to where they're going to flatline off. Mantis Rider still looks a little bit interesting, but you can just tell how much Cons was overprinted if this card can't even go above the 70-cent mark, being played as a 4 of in a deck. But anyway, what are your thoughts on Pro Tour? What was the most interesting deck? Would you think anything out of Lantern is going to get banned, Ensnaring Bridge or Ancient Stirrings? Did you watch? Did you enjoy it? How are your thoughts on Modern? All those just in the comment section below would be helpful. And going forward, we can figure out where to invest in this particular format. Overall, I think that the format's in pretty good shape. Now, of course, this is a little bit skewed with the Modern meta. I wish that the Magic would quit hiding information, because it's getting ridiculous with the way that they just, you know, showcase only 5 decks out of the Modern. According to this, Tron is the #1 played deck, followed by Grixis Death Shadow. So this isn't representative of what happened at the Pro Tour. You can see, though, that nothing is breached above the 7.5% meta share. And this is after the Pro Tour gets to add all of the decks within that. And the same thing at the Pro Tour. I don't think anything was above the 10% share. So Humans was the highest at, what, like 9? So this is a really, really good place to be in Modern. I think eventually it will get people investing in other decks and other strategies, just to, because it becomes a headache with the metagame. If you only have one deck, you need at least like 2, 3 before going into GP, before you can really feel comfortable like which deck you're going to play at the current meta. So I was completely wrong about Storm. Look, Storm isn't even here anymore. It has completely been wiped off. There it is. It's not even the top 5 anymore. And I made kind of a spoof video thinking that Storm would just absolutely just dominate this Pro Tour. However, it seems the Thoughtseize decks did do a good job weeding out Storm. But we'll see if we have a lot of decks that come in to start beating up on the kind of Thoughtseize decks, and then we can see the Storm and the Scapeshift type decks come back into existence. It's so funny to watch the roller coaster of these type of decks, like which ones. It looks like Tron is the non-interactive deck that is the deck of choice at the moment, as Tron does tend to prey on the Jeskai controls, the Grixis controls, and especially that U-White control. That is a miserable matchup, white-blue control versus Tron. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Again, I need to make a rogue market for Pauper. I'm going to try to do this week. There are still some very significant cards to invest in. Still throwing a lot of money in Pauper. Made some pretty good significant returns. Just be careful with the TCG cut. It's when you pay for shipping and then try to sell cards back, it becomes miserable with speculating on cards that don't have like above a $2, $3 price range. Anyway, this has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.